Home to daddy.
Damn police.
I
You ever
got
been down south?
weed. I'm knocking it dead, big man.
That's a tasty corner, pal.
Give
You
me
ever been
green,
down
you hear?
south? Run away, yo. Hey, you about to get pumped out.
like me daddy.
Hey, hold on. What you doing, giving bird? Hey,
Aye, aye. Come on, daddy.
what you think you're doing?
Research laboratory where the mean old scientists genetically altered.
Millennium Fair. Learn the art of cooking with turnips. Yum yum. Buy genuine reproduction medieval artifacts including maces, double-handed battle swords, and one-size-fits-all chainmail. And this weekend only, pick up an authentic mechanical Lady of the Lake in Excalibur. It's perfect for your garden pond or swimming pool. And learn how to rid your condo of vermin using a penny whistle and a mysterious prancing German named Hans. The medieval Millennium Fair, every weekend at Liberty City Park.
All right, Liberty City, you are listening to Chatterbox, the show that... Get him out.
Laszlo, close, Laszlo. I hate him. I just hate him.
Wait, we're all about opinions on Chatterbox, which is Liberty City's premier phone-in station. But why don't you like clones?
I just hate them. They're so constricting. I mean, there's a line where close, and the lion is the king of the jungle. So why can't I, a humble citizen, go naked?
Well, I mean, I guess a lion has two distinct advantages over you. One, I mean, it says you say a king, and therefore it can exercise its royal prerogative to not wear clothes. And two,
might
it's
have a good
cat,
time.
and therefore it doesn't have to. And three, I mean, hell, I think about it. If you want to try to dress a lion, you can, but I guess what we're learning is that life can be a little unfair at
Eurocom
times.
Entertainment Software, a name very familiar to a lot of gamers of a certain age. A developer that was as prolific as they were enduring, lasting over 20 years despite many challenges, eventually becoming one of the most recognized studios of their day before their sudden closure. So how did their story go? What is the story of Eurocom Entertainment Software?
Don't you believe in free speech? Free expression? No, of course you don't. All you believe in is free.
Eurocom Entertainment Software is a developer that is somewhat close to my heart because in spite of never being the most famous game developer nor being one of my favorites, they're one of the developers that really kept popping up in my life just for sheer volume. And if you're watching this, chances are the same applies to you. Chances are good that something you played as a kid was developed by them. And I want to give the devil its due. The funny thing about Eurocom is much of their history is shrouded in mystery because there's not a lot of publicly available information, at least none that's easily accessible. That's not necessarily a mistake, as co-founder Hugh Binns said in a 2006 interview with GamingIndustry.biz, we've always preferred to keep our heads down and let our games speak for themselves. The confidential nature of our developments has often limited what we can talk about anyway. So a lot of the history of Eurocom is more constructive rather than reproductive, looking at their history through bits and pieces from various interviews that we can find. And based on those interviews, this is as accurate a retelling as possible. Eurocom Entertainment Software began its life in October of 1988 in the city of Derby, England, and it was co-founded by the team of Matt Sneap, Chris Shrigley, Hugh Binns, Tim Rogers, and Neil Baldwin. Although I've read mixed reports about whether or not there were 5 founding members or just 4. I believe the one that's sometimes not included is Tim Rogers, but generally he's considered one of the founding members. Unlike a lot of other game developers that got their start due to the collapse of a previous business or disgruntled employees, the beginning of Eurocom is actually fairly mundane all the way down. As a matter of fact, I would almost consider it quaint in a DIY sort of way. According to Chris Shrigley in an interview with C64.com, the foundation of Eurocom basically came about from a bunch of friends who knew each other on CompuNet, a very archaic online chat room from the very early days of the internet, going all the way back to the C64. They were all gaming professionals who worked for various companies including Gremlin Graphics and Core Design. Tim Rogers even programmed a game for Sega in 1988, though there was some work done for lesser companies like Softtech International or Houston Consultants, but in fairness, they wouldn't be considered lesser companies if they'd stood the test of time, or at least stayed around until the early 2000s like the others. So perhaps that's a bit unfair. They were all mostly just as serious around this time. So these people weren't slumming it, they were pretty serious folk. The two main leads behind the Foundation were Matt and Chris, who were best friends. They even called themselves the Pro Coders. And at some point discussed the idea of starting their own company because they felt they had gotten enough experience in the gaming industry to do it on their own. And as it turns out, Matt's father, who I believe is named Ian, owned a small electronics company called Zycom and was able to finance the company as well as give them the equipment they needed. And from there, they hired a couple of people they also knew from CompuNet, those being the other three founding members, Hugh, Tim, and Neil. And if LinkedIn is anything to go by, at least 3 of these founding members stayed until the very end, or at least near the bitter end. Despite being incredibly tight with Matt, Chris would only last 2 years at the company before going his own way. But we get ahead of ourselves. So with a financial backer and a team of 5 passionate professionals, all they needed was a name. And you may think that the name Eurocom has some sort of grander significance to the team. Believe it or not, no. In a 1998 interview with IGN, Hugh Binns recounted how they came up with the name. When we first started the company, one of the guys who helped us get it going had a tradition where the first name that was suggested would be the name used. And one of the guys here made a joke saying, let's call it Eurocom, and it just stuck. Simple as that. Which continues to show the ragtag mentality that these guys had towards the company. They were a bunch of 20-somethings flying by the seat of their pants. Between the end of 1988 and early 1991, the 5 of them worked on their debut game, Magician. An NES title, which is odd considering the fact that all the founding members of the studio were from the UK and all their previous experience had been making PC games, as the PC market in Europe was much more profitable than in other regions. Therefore, it wasn't unusual to specialize in it. It's even stated that they had to figure out NES hardware to be able to make Magician. It was never stated, but it can be presumed that the members of Eurocom saw that if they wanted to break into the North American or Japanese games market, the biggest games markets in the world at the time, they needed to focus on consoles as that was the dominant platforms in those regions. So they made the game and went to Japan to pitch it to a company called Taxan Kaga. If you haven't heard of Taxan Kaga, that's probably for a good reason. Taxan was a game publishing subsidiary of the larger Kaga Electronics company, but it didn't stick around for very long. As a matter of fact, once they agreed to publish Magician, that would actually be the final game they would publish before their parent company would shut them down. Which didn't speak very highly to the success of Magician. It was a very ambitious game for its day, integrating a unique RPG system combined with action elements and all contained in one of the most beautiful looking games that the NES could muster. It's considered a beloved cult classic to this day among those who have played it, but it didn't find itself being particularly successful for its day. Hence the word cult in front of the word classic. During this time, they were also working on a second game under Taxan that was titled John Smith's Special Agent, a very overt and, I guess, apropos parody of James Bond. It's apropos because of what came later. With that said, according to a 2007 interview with MI6.com, Chris Schriegli recounted that at some point during development, Taxan pulled out of the publishing agreement and John Smith was left high and dry. And so was all of Eurocom. After Magician failed to sell a lot and John Smith was left without a publisher, this high-risk startup was suddenly on thin ice. At this point, the financial backer, Mr. Sneap, had suddenly gotten cold feet on the whole ordeal and opted to cut back heavily on the amount of money he was willing to put into the company, leading to all the founding members' hours being cut severely. Either to 2 days or 3 days a week. I've read both at various times. This is what led to Chris leaving the company for greener pastures after only 2 games, as he couldn't afford to pay his mortgage with his hours cut. However, the remaining members of Eurocom shipped the game around to various publishers, leading the game to be picked up by THQ and rebranded as James Bond Jr. on NES, as they had the license. To this day, the reception of the game is mixed, with some considering it one of the rare good THQ games on NES, while others say it's dull and repetitive. But while eventually they did manage to find an outlet for the game to be released, it wasn't a great financial success. As such, Eurocom had to keep on trucking to try and push forward into an uncertain future. Now, despite debuting with an original title, it would actually be a while before their next original title. Following James Bond Jr., they would slum it for a few years, making ports of various games on various platforms. This would include the NES version of Lethal Weapon and Drop Zone, neither of which were particularly successful. Then you had other games like the Game Boy version of Rodland and the SNES version of Brutal Paws of Fury. Among these various port jobs to keep the lights on, they made Stone Protectors, a game made solely by them, which I thought was an original title, but apparently it was part of a multimedia franchise I've never heard of, and it was maligned as a weak attempt to cash in on the Troll Dolls craze of the early 90s. But with that said, even if Eurocom hadn't released a substantial hit around the time, they were still doing one thing right. They were proving themselves to be a reliable support studio for ports and unfinished products. Hence they got their big break in 1994 in the form of The Jungle Book. From what little information I can gather online, it appears that Virgin Interactive were developing a Mega Drive/Genesis version of the game via an internal studio headed by one David Perry, who, with the rest of the team, would leave the company to form Shiny Entertainment and make Earthworm Jim. This left Virgin a bit high and dry, so they contracted a reliable journeyman studio in Eurocom to finish up the incomplete version of the game, and while they were at it, why not also make a version of the game for Game Boy, NES, and SNES? The game was a hit. It wasn't the biggest hit in the partnership between Virgin and Disney, but it was still a major hit, especially for the fledgling studio, and it helped Eurocom get some capital together and establish themselves in the industry. It proves that old adage of 80% of success is showing up. This success would continue to go on to define their successes as the years went on, as they would continue gaining notoriety as a reliable middleman developer. Not much is known about the specific development of a lot of these games as it pertains to Eurocom. Once again, it goes back to the fact that Eurocom was fairly low-key and secretive by design, but it's notable that they were very, very efficient, at their peak bringing out 6 games in 1 year. And this wasn't some big shot publisher like Psygnosis either. This was still a comparably very small developer. With that said, the projects they took on gradually became higher and higher profile. After the Jungle Book, they made a couple ports of Earthworm Jim, one of the ports of Super Street Fighter II Turbo, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, and they made what is possibly considered to be their most beloved project, and that is Maui Mallard in Cold Shadow, starring Donald Duck, sort of. Considered by some to be among the best Super Nintendo games ever made. The Mega Drive and PC versions were already being made by Disney Interactive, and I specify Mega Drive in this case because that version was never released in North America outside of the Sega Channel service, as Disney didn't have a video game publishing license or publishing partner at the time. And while they could have developed the SNES version by themselves, they opted instead to license the Super Nintendo. To Eurocom, as Matt Sneap recounted in a 2020 interview with VK.com. So as Eurocom, we developed Jungle Book for Virgin Interactive on NES, Game Boy, and we took over the Sega Genesis version when Dave Perry was asked to concentrate on Aladdin. This led us to being commissioned by Disney Interactive to develop the SNES of Maui Mallard, which was in production for the Genesis in the US. Editor's note, that's not an accurate retelling, as Aladdin was already out before Jungle Book, and Maui Mallard wasn't specifically intended to come out for the Genesis in the US. But like the company's history, memories are constructive, not reproductive, so that little job they did a couple of years previously, which had already been a great success for them, was what got their foot in the door to much bigger things. And while Maui Mallard wasn't the biggest success, largely because it came out so late in the lifespan of the Super Nintendo, after the PlayStation and the Saturn were already on the market, with Eurocom proving themselves a reliable partner, they were no longer simply on Disney's radar. Disney then considered them a quality go-to developer for movie tie-in games, and as a matter of fact, while Eurocom was initially developing a second Maui Mallard game, what came next was their biggest success to date. and among some of their biggest successes of all time. According to Matt Sneap in the same interview, after Maui, Disney asked us to develop Maui 2 on the PlayStation. We had a demo up and running. It was 2.5D. So simple 3D with lots of texture work to make it look like pixel art, but you were fixed to a limited depth in the screen. This was going for a few months, then we had a call that Disney needed a game developed for Hercules, so that was that. Maui 2 morphed into Hercules, which was the correct decision to make in my opinion. If there's any point in their history where you could consider them to have made it, this was it. The game was critically successful and widely popular. The specifics are unknown, but there's a reason why Disney was a keen return customer to Eurocom, having them develop further tie-in games for Tarzan as well as Atlantis. Of these games, I've only played Tarzan for a significant amount of time, and outside of the final boss, it's a very solid platformer, while Hercules is a very stylish, very beautiful side-scroller with a simple but effective gameplay style. Before we get ahead of ourselves, they were also making another one of their biggest hits alongside Hercules, that being the N64 port of Cruisin' World. Cruisin' the World. Yeah. Now that song is stuck in your head, just as it's been stuck in my head for the past 10 years. That's an earworm. This wasn't the first time that Eurocom had worked with Midway, as they had previously worked together for the Saturn port of Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, and this was also a departure from Cruisin' USA, which had its N64 port done by Williams, the same company that did a lot of Mortal Kombat home ports. But Eugene Jarvis, lead designer of the Cruisin' arcade games, said that he was dissatisfied with the home port of Cruisin' USA and wanted to give someone else a chance. So it fell to Eurocom to do the port, and presumably since Eurocom had proven themselves in working with porting games to less powerful hardware, because the Saturn was the Saturn, Midway saw them as the perfect people to port the ambitious Cruisin' World to the limitations of the N64. The game came out, and it was considered a vast improvement over Cruisin' USA, and was considered a near-perfect port of the arcade game, which meant that for the time being, Williams was out as the home port people for Midway in favor of Eurocom, who would go on to make home ports of games like Hydro Thunder, NBA Showtime, NBA Hoops, and a few more games we'll talk about in a second. Eurocom continued to fire on all cylinders, 1997 being one of their most successful years, releasing no less than 5 major games, which aligns with the public knowledge of their studio setup around this time. At their peak, they had 200 employees, but in a 1998 interview with IGN, Matt Sneap, Hugh Binns, and Tim Rogers all sat down to discuss Mortal Kombat 4, and it was casually mentioned they had roughly 70 employees split into 5 teams working for the studio by this point. You may wonder how they managed that sort of output. Well, as it happens, in an interview with YouTuber Eevee, Eurocom game producer John Williams, not that one, outlined the process of how games were made by the time the studio had expanded to 5 separate teams. We would be working on multiple projects at the same time, at each where possible with a different submission date. A project would begin with a skeleton crew of leads plus additional programmers and artists to get things underway while the design was being worked on. The team would grow as more of the design was fleshed out, and at the end of the project, additional people would become trained on other projects that had been completed, so they were assigned to bring our game to completion, which spoke to the fact that by this point, they had pretty much iterated their development pipeline to a science, meaning that they could be developing 5 games at once, and sometimes would bring out 5 games in a year. And in this particular year, aside from Cruisin' World and Hercules, they also made an N64 port of Duke Nukem 3D, an original game called Machine Hunter, and an arcade port of the Midway arcade fighter, War Gods. It was the first game developed with Midway's new 3D fighter engine, and was essentially a stress test of that engine so they could refine it before Mortal Kombat 4. That way, if they didn't get it right, they wouldn't be risking the reputation of Mortal Kombat. Not yet, anyway. Which is fitting because War Gods was crap, and while the home port was better, not by much. The difference between it and MK4 was night and day, but I don't blame Eurocom for that. Still, this continued their working relationship and proved that Eurocom was perfectly capable of porting Mortal Kombat 4 to consoles when the time came, and that time came the next year in 1998. This was probably their most ambitious project to date, as they had some very lofty goals, including perfectly emulating the arcade version while maintaining 60 FPS. And they felt they had succeeded. In the same interview as before, they wanted this. I think we've had a strong reaction from Nintendo and Midway and anyone else who's seen it. We think we have the best Nintendo 64 fighter, ignoring the fact they also made the PS1 version. Still, they were very proud of us. To this day, Mortal Kombat 4 is still among fans, but if there's one thing that was never in doubt, it's the accuracy of the home console port. And in fact, it's said they even slightly improved upon it with its improved combo implementation. And they would become even more... with the follow-up, Mortal Kombat Gold, a later PC and Dreamcast port which could almost be considered a remaster that gave you new features, new characters, and a much higher polygon count than even the arcade version, making what many consider to be the definitive version of the game. This would be the last...
First time he's gonna go for extra credit on a sobriety test. Cobb's reaction to Barrett Island. I mean, he was kind of killing it until Armadillo. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay.
Hey, so since we're moving into the Fallout universe, I want to let you all know that I will strangle you for a geek bar or a Raz or an air bar. That's going to be my new thing. I'm literally going to be hunting down geek bars, okay? So, ladies, you better make sure that your husband is warlord material, because if I spot that geek bar in your fucking hand, oh, you're cooked. Oh, you're so fucking cooked. Hey, so...
We have some actual good news tonight. A Democrat has won a state...
Hold on to your butt. Hold on to your butts and welcome to Jurassic Park, where the dinosaurs weren't the only predators that day. The real apex threat? Liability. John Hammond invites guests to an island filled with genetically engineered predators, and then the power goes out. That's not an act of God. That's a system failure. The law asks one simple question: should you have seen this coming? When Malcolm says,
life, finds a way.
Yeah, you should have seen this coming.
Oh my god, crumbs, baby. You gotta get together.
Flashbang!
Ah!
You off my planet!
Oh my god, crumbs, baby. You gotta get together.
Flashbang!
Ah!
We have some actual good news tonight. A Democrat has. We have some actual good news.
Like, we're done.
Get going!
Abracadabra. I just put 100.
What are you wearing? Sometimes.
We have some action.
Time that Eurocom would work on Mortal Kombat. Despite the fact they had proven themselves, Midway was starting to see consoles as the dominant platform for fighting games compared to the arcades, and were in the process of merging their home consoles and arcade divisions, meaning that Midway's in-house studios would then begin to make home console ports of future MK games. Thanks for nothing, Eurocom. But that didn't matter because they were still getting high-profile projects coming in. The next 3 projects would be, in their own ways, defining for the studio. First, they made yet another original title, a Banjo-Kazooie-inspired 3D platformer called 40 Winks. The last game they made in the 20th century, as a matter of fact. The game was inspired by the idea of what a world of frightening creatures would be like through the eyes of a child. This was a game that had a lot of imagination and creativity behind it, and apparently the studio's reputation preceded them in this case because several publishers were competing to purchase the distribution rights for the game. Eventually it was sold to GT Interactive. Unfortunately, the game didn't do so well. Partially it was to blame on GT Interactive being financially troubled at the time, partially it was to blame on the stiff competition in the 3D platformer genre at the time, and part of it had to do with the fact that the game didn't turn out so well. A planned N64 port was never released. Hold up. Okay, so apparently it was released on N64 in 2019. But it not being a success is all well and good because at the time they were also working on yet another one of their biggest projects and the second game around this time that would define their successes going forward. In fact, this is possibly their most well-known game even to this day. A little game called Crash Bash, a game which took quite a few cues from Mario Party. This was the 5th Crash Bandicoot game. Quick history lesson. The Crash Bandicoot series was initially a joint venture between Universal Interactive and Naughty Dog for exclusive release on PlayStation, meaning that while Naughty Dog were the developers, Universal Interactive owned the rights to the games. So Naughty Dog eventually decided to cut out the middleman and work with Sony directly, eventually being purchased by them, even attempting to deliberately jump the shark with Crash Team Racing by introducing aliens, apparently being unaware of the fact that Crash Bandicoot is such a cartoony series that it's pretty much impossible to jump the shark. It's like Looney Tunes jumping the shark. Although, on a side note, it's funny how aliens weren't a step too far for Crash Bandicoot fans, but arm tattoos were. So the reins were handed to Eurocom for Crash Bash, with Mark Cerny, the former president of Universal Interactive, acting as a lead designer of the game in order to maintain continuity with previous games. As for Eurocom's involvement, game producer John Williams said in a 2022 interview with YouTuber 9Matt2, Eurocom had many years' experience in the games industry, which led to contracts with key publishers. The team that handled Crash Bash had previously created Hercules and Tarzan for Disney, and when Tarzan was nearing completion, the directors looked around for something to follow. So while this isn't directly stated, this says they pitched their services to various publishers since they had the clout to do so, and Universal contracted them for their first non-Naughty Dog Crash project. While it was the worst-selling Crash Bandicoot PS1 game, it still sold well over 3 million copies, though the game still didn't quite reach the expectations that the developers had hoped. The game was okay, I guess. Of all the Crash Bandicoot games I've seen,
What'd the boss say?
Don't even think about going in a coal mine.
It was easily my least favorite, but the game is also how I first learned about this company. Usually be blamed on Universal Interactive, particularly the issue that the game had very few game modes and many levels were variations on the same 6 or 7 gameplay styles.
Hey, so this is not a real ceasefire. Both sides are going to continue to fire their missiles. The Axis of Epstein, America and Israel, and Iran, they're all going to keep firing. It's part of the 10-point peace plan, the surrender deal that Trump said he'll agree to. Part of it is that Israel must cease their entire operation in Lebanon, their illegal invasion. They're not going to do that. Another one is that the United States must withdraw all of their forces within the entirety of the Levant and get rid of all of their bases. Trump's not going to agree to that. Another one is that ships have to pay $2 million to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Trump's not going to agree to that. All of this is the Iranians just saying, like, fuck you, you really want to surrender? Here are our terms. And this is how we'll open the strait. By the way, this leaves the Iranians with the Strait of Hormuz completely in their control. This is not a ceasefire. This is just like, go fuck yourself. We know that you're not going to agree to this, and Donnie knows he's not going to agree to it either. Hey, so...
I can't see fucking shit out of the thing. Are we ready or what? Hold on, I'm fucking with my iPhone. Oh, I can't see. Kai's always been a big...
Oh, she's so pretty. She's adorable. Oh, she's traumatized. Oh, she's so pretty. She's adorable.
We are now learning more about the details of Donald Trump's agreement with Iran, and it appears that he completely folded, gave them everything they wanted, and put the United States in a worse position. It seems like he just got completely outsmarted. So Donald Trump posted the official statement from Iran, where they said that the United States and Iran are using their 10-point peace plan as the starting point for negotiations. But their 10-point peace plan is just giving Iran everything they want, such as lifting all U.S. sanctions or allowing them to impose a...
Was the night before?
Where's the dope? Get this shit, Mario. Woo! Get that shit, blood. Get that shit. Get that shit. Get that shit, blood.
I never thought the day would come where I would have to say this, but apparently I do. Mine accounts online are not a safe place for pedos, for abusers, for rapists, or anybody